Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
The Toronto Blue Jays just got linked to a name that probably has most fans scratching their heads, Yoan Moncada. According to reporter Francis Romero, Toronto is monitoring the former top prospect as a possible free agent option. At first glance, this connection seems odd, maybe even concerning depending on your perspective. But when you dig into the context and understand what role he might fill, it actually starts making a lot more sense than the initial reaction might suggest. Moncada isn't one of the glamorous names dominating off-season headlines. He's not commanding massive contracts or generating bidding wars. But the report also mentions the Angels, Pirates, and White Sox as teams showing interest, which tells you something important about the market perception of Moncada right now. Those three franchises are all coming off losing seasons and trying to rebuild their competitiveness. They're looking for low-cost, high-upside bounce-back candidates who can either contribute to winning or become trade assets if things go well. That's exactly what Moncada represents at this stage of his career, a bounce-back opportunity. He was once the top prospect in all of baseball, someone who carried enormous expectations after being traded from Boston to Chicago in the Chris Sale blockbuster deal. For a while, he delivered on some of that promise. Between 2017 and 2021, Moncada accumulated solid production, posting over 12 wins above replacement with respectable power numbers and decent on-base ability. He wasn't the superstar people envisioned, but he was a legitimately productive major leaguer. Then injuries derailed everything. Over the past 4 seasons split between the White Sox and Angels, Moncada appeared in only 292 games. That's barely more than one full season spread across 4 years. When he has been on the field, he's still shown flashes, accumulating positive WAR and demonstrating the plate discipline that made him intriguing in the first place. Statistical projections still view him as an above-average hitter when healthy, particularly in his ability to work counts and get on base. For a team like Toronto that values on-base percentage, that skill set has appeal. But here's where this gets interesting for the Blue Jays specifically. Toronto's needs are different from the Angels, Pirates, or White Sox. Those teams are searching for everyday starters who can help them crawl back toward respectability. The Blue Jays are coming off a World Series appearance and have much higher expectations. They should be targeting impact players who can slot into everyday roles and contribute immediately to championship contention. So why would they be looking at Moncada? The answer is depth and versatility. Moncada wouldn't be coming to Toronto as a primary starter. He'd be a depth piece, someone who can rotate through multiple positions, provide specific matchup advantages, and fill in when injuries inevitably happen over a long season. The fact that he's a switch hitter increases his strategic value significantly. Against right-handed pitching, you could deploy a left-handed or switch-hitting combination with players like Moncada, Spencer Horwitz, and others. Against lefties, you shift to right-handed options like Ernie Clement. This matters because Toronto's infield situation remains somewhat fluid. Bo Bichette's future is the biggest question mark. If he returns and moves to second base as he's indicated he's willing to do, that changes the entire infield configuration. If he leaves, Toronto needs to find solutions at both shortstop and second base. They've been linked to higher profile players like Alex Bregman, who could take over third base, which would then allow other pieces to shift around. Within that context, having someone like Moncada available as an affordable depth option makes roster construction easier. Ross Atkins has been transparent about Toronto's approach this offseason. They're monitoring the top names on the market, but waiting for prices to come down from the initial asking points. While that waiting game plays out, identifying smart, low-risk additions like Moncada becomes important. These aren't the headline moves that get fans excited, but they're the kind of strategic decisions that separate well-run organizations from the rest. At 30 years old, Moncada is young enough that if his body cooperates, he could still have productive years ahead of him. The talent that made him the number one prospect in baseball didn't disappear. It's been buried under injuries and inconsistency, but the foundation is still there. Sometimes all a player needs is a change of scenery, a clearly defined role, and an organization that can maximize their remaining strengths. Toronto could potentially provide that environment. Think about this signing in comparison to Isaiah Keener-Falefa from a couple years back. That was a quiet move that didn't generate much excitement initially, but ended up providing real value in a depth role. Moncada could follow a similar trajectory. If he's healthy and productive, great. You've got a useful piece at minimal cost. If he struggles or gets hurt again, you're not heavily invested and can move on without significant consequence. That's the definition of a low-risk, high-reward situation. The Blue Jays fan base might be disappointed if Moncada ends up being one of their off-season additions, especially if it comes at the expense of pursuing bigger names, but that's a misunderstanding of what this move would represent. Signing Moncada doesn't preclude Toronto from also landing Alex Bregman or bringing back Bo Bichette or making other significant additions. These things aren't mutually exclusive. You can do both. Sign impact players for everyday roles and add depth pieces like Moncada to round out the roster. Roster construction is about building functional depth across 26 roster spots, not just assembling 9 stars and hoping for the best. Having quality options on the bench who can step in against specific matchups or cover for injuries is what allows teams to sustain success over 162 games. Moncada, despite his recent struggles, still profiles as someone who could fill that role effectively if his health holds. The strategic value of a switch hitter cannot be overstated, especially in today's game where matchup advantages matter enormously. Being able to deploy different lineup configurations based on opposing pitching gives managers flexibility that can swing close games. If Moncada can provide competent at-bats from both sides of the plate while playing adequate defense at multiple positions, that's legitimate value even in a part-time role. Obviously, there are legitimate concerns. The injury history is real and extensive. 4 seasons with only 292 games played is a massive red flag. Any team signing Moncada has to go in understanding that availability is far from guaranteed, but that's also why the financial commitment would presumably be minimal. You're not betting significant money or years on him. You're taking a calculated flyer on talent that might still be there if everything breaks right. For Toronto specifically, this makes even more sense when you consider their organizational philosophy. They've consistently valued players with strong plate discipline and on-base skills, even if the power numbers aren't elite. Moncada fits that profile. His career walk rates have been solid, and projections still view his contact skills favorably when he's healthy. That's the kind of skill set that plays up in Toronto's system and offensive approach. The Blue Jays are in a position where they need to be creative with roster building. They can't just outspend everyone to plug every hole. Making smart, opportunistic signings on players whose value might be temporarily depressed allows them to allocate resources more effectively toward the truly expensive positions. If Moncada costs you only a couple $1 million and provides even replacement-level production, that's a win relative to the investment. Will Yoán Moncada actually sign with Toronto? That remains to be seen. These early reports about teams monitoring players often don't lead anywhere concrete. But the fact that Toronto is doing their homework on options like this shows they're being thorough in exploring every avenue to improve the roster. That's what you want from a front office, even if every individual move doesn't excite the fan base. The offseason is far from over, and the Blue Jays still have plenty of opportunities to make splashier additions that generate more enthusiasm. But don't dismiss the value of depth signings like Moncada could represent. Championship teams aren't built solely on star power. They're built on having functional players in every roster spot who can contribute when called upon. If Moncada can be that for Toronto in 2026, it'll be a smart move regardless of how underwhelming it might seem right now.